So today's video is going to be another true crime video and another video in my April abduction series. If you're new to my channel, every single day up until Tuesday I am doing a true crime video that somehow relates to the theme of abduction. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, make sure you're subscribed. And today we are going to be talking about a pretty famous case, although I'd never heard of it, so I'm hoping that a few of you guys might not have heard of it, but I'm pretty sure that you probably have. I still felt like I couldn't do this week as a theme, this abduction theme, and not talk about this case. So today we're going to be talking about the abduction of Colleen Stan, also known as the girl in the box. Before I get into this video, I just want to give my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone that I talk about in this video. This is all just information that I have found on the internet and I'm compiling into one video. So Colleen Stan was born on December 31st, 1956 in Oregon in the USA, and she was 20 years old at the time of her disappearance. On the 19th of May 1977, Colleen Stan decided to hitchhike her way from her home in Oregon all the way to Northern California, which was somewhere around 600 miles away, and she was going to surprise her friend for her birthday. By mid-afternoon, Colleen was over halfway there in the town of Red Bluff in California, and she only had about 2 more hours worth of hitchhiking to go. Colleen was very picky about the people that she hitchhiked with, and she had no problem saying no to people that she didn't feel comfortable getting in the car with. She'd actually already turned down 2 different drivers while waiting for her next lift in Red Bluff, and then a young couple pulled over and she thought, yeah, this one's good. The couple were called Cameron and Jenise Hooker. They were a married couple. They were just a few years older than Colleen was, and Jenise was actually holding the couple's 8-month-old child, and so Colleen thought, this is perfectly safe.
Well, this is a safe ride, and I thought, I was kind of thanking my lucky stars. Oh, this is just wonderful, you know.
At first, there wasn't much conversation going on in the car, but I mean, there could have been many reasons for this. For a start, they had no idea who Colleen was. Like, they didn't know each other, they didn't have anything to talk about, so that could have been a reason. They could have been socially awkward. The couple could have just had an argument before they pulled over. Like, there could have been so many reasons. So Colleen didn't think too much into it at first.
I did kind of get a creepy feeling while we were driving there because he kept looking in the rearview mirror and like checking me out.
After a little while of driving, they pulled over at a gas station when Colleen got out of the car and went to use the bathroom.
I was washing up and this voice inside me just kept telling me to jump out the window and run and never look back, and I thought, why do I feel this way? Why do I want to do this?
But Colleen ignored her gut instinct and she just got back in the car and they all continued driving, and then after a short while Cameron turned down a very deserted lane. Once they were down this lane, he turned off the ignition on the car and Jenise and the 8-month-old baby got out of the car.
Suddenly, he jumped in the back seat. He had a knife and he held it up to my throat, and I just froze and said, "Are you going to do what I say?" And I thought, oh my God, this guy's going to kill me. And so I said yes.
Cameron blindfolded, gagged and handcuffed Colleen in the back seat, and then he turned to a little wooden box that had been sat next to Colleen the whole time, but she just didn't pay much attention to it.
It had like hinges and it had like a hole for your neck, and he put it over my head.
So Colleen laid there in the back seat, handcuffed, gagged, blindfolded with this box on her head, when she felt the engine turn back on and the car drive back down the hill. Eventually they arrived at the couple's house in Red Bluff and Cameron led Colleen down to the basement. He removed all of Colleen's clothes and then got her to stand on this ice box while he attached her wrists to hooks on the ceiling.
And then all of a sudden, without saying anything, he pulled the ice chest out from under me, and I was suspended there.
Colleen was obviously terrified and in shock, and she began screaming, because what else do you do in that situation? She began screaming and Cameron got out a whip to punish her.
He told me to shut up, and so I did, and I just hung there and I just cried, and I thought, my God, what is this?
Cameron tortured Colleen there in that basement for hours that night before eventually leaving her still hooked to the ceiling, still blindfolded, but he allowed her a crate to sit on.
And he had that head box thing attached to the top of it, and he put that around my head. And he had connected my wrist up to the sides of the box, And he left me there like that all night. And I was in so much pain, my wrist hurt. And I just thought, I'm going to die. I'm going to die.
Obviously, this whole time, Colleen's friends and family believed that she was hitchhiking her way up to California. She was going to stay a couple of days for a friend's birthday and then come home. Whereas this friend up in California had no idea that Colleen was even coming because it was a surprise. And so when Colleen didn't turn up there, obviously she wasn't expected. So there was no communication between this girl in California and Colleen's family and friends. Eventually, after 4 days of Colleen not being seen by anyone, people started to realise that maybe she'd been in California a little bit longer than she said she'd be. So Colleen's roommates decided to get in contact with the parents to see what was going on, to see if she'd stopped there on the way back, just to let them know that she still hadn't been home.
We knew there had to be something wrong, because Colleen was not the one to just take off and leave like that. She would have called and let us know. She would not have let us worry.
Colleen's parents immediately began manually searching, so they were driving 700 miles between California and Oregon, just looking for her, searching in towns on the way there. The police were obviously contacted, but they had absolutely no leads to go on. It was like she'd disappeared into thin air.
Unfortunately, I was just thinking that someone has probably killed her. It was like she just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Colleen could have literally been anywhere between Oregon and California, which is like a 700-mile distance. And so it was going to take a long time for police to be able to get leads. Colleen was kept naked and blindfolded the whole time, and for 23 hours a day, she was made to lay in this coffin-sized box and just stay there. She was only let out for 1 hour a day to be tortured and to maybe eat something.
He told me right in the beginning, he said, go ahead and scream. He said, I'll cut your vocal cords. I've done it before. And I believed him.
Meanwhile, Cameron and Jenise lived their lives as if nothing was going on. Cameron would go to work during the day and Jenise would look after the 8-month-old baby. Every day when Cameron would return home from work, he would go straight down to the basement and torture Colleen for hours while also taking pictures of it.
This photo was later altered by police. The white area covers Colleen's naked body, chained to a device hooker called the rack.
He attaches electrical wires to her and gives her shocks of electricity.
This daily routine continued for literally months, with Colleen still being kept in this box for 23 hours a day, and when she was let out, she probably wished that she never was. Meanwhile, back at home, it had literally been months since anyone had last seen Colleen, and everyone was just so confused. It was literally like she vanished into thin air, like I said. Colleen's mother even sent her dental records to the local authorities just in case a body turned up and they needed to identify it as Colleen. That was how much people were losing hope. Like, people were just so confused. It was like, surely she can't still be out there. Back in the basement, Colleen's torture continued, mainly at the hands of Cameron Hooker, which was facilitated and watched by his wife, Jenise. Finally, after 8 months of this daily torture, she'd been blindfolded, naked, and kept in this box 23 hours a day the whole time. She'd been blindfolded ever since the car. She didn't have a clue what this room looked like. So finally, in January of 1978, 8 months after her abduction, Cameron let Colleen take the blindfold off and she could finally see her surroundings. Cameron opened the door to a very tiny storage cupboard under the stairs, which he called the workshop. And in this little storage cupboard, he kept an extensive collection of BDSM magazines, one of which he handed to Colleen.
It had an article about the slave trade and these slave owners and all this, and I thought, oh my God, this is real, you know? And I was just shaking.
He then handed Colleen a contract to sign, and in this contract it talked about an organisation of slave owners called the Company. Cameron told Colleen that she had to sign this contract in order to be able to stay with him, and if she didn't sign it then she would be turned on to a much worse slave master as part of the Company.
He was very meticulous and he always had things to back up his stories, and I did what he said because I believed that he would kill me if I didn't.
In this contract it stated that Colleen must submit her full being to any and all desires of her master. being Cameron, and she signed it. Cameron Hooker also signed this contract under the alias of Michael Powers. Cameron also told Colleen that the company was always watching her, and if she ever tried to escape, they would kill her and all of her family. As of then, Colleen was referred to as K, not like K the name, just K the letter. And I don't know what the significance of the letter K was, but it's just to dehumanize her. He knew that her name was Colleen, but they would refer to her as K. Colleen was forced to refer to Cameron as Master, and she was only allowed to talk if he gave her permission to do so. After the signing of this contract, Colleen was treated slightly better. And when I say slightly, I mean literally just a fraction better. She was still being kept in this box, but now she could be clothed, and she didn't have to wear her blindfold all the time. And that was when she was raped for the first time in her 8-month imprisonment. Eventually, a year after Colleen's abduction in May of 1978, the Hooker family decided to move to a mobile home, still with Colleen in their captivity.
Now Cameron Hooker built another box for his slave. As this replica used later in the trial shows, the ventilated box fit into the frame of his and Jenice's waterbed. There, Colleen would spend the majority of the next 2 years, subjected to every detail of the couple's private life.
Again, she would stay locked in this box for the majority of the day, and she would be kept in this box underneath Cameron and Jenice's waterbed. At this point, Colleen's freedom expanded a little bit more. Cameron and Jenice would let her out of this box a little bit more every day to do chores and to do gardening. Jenice and Cameron actually had a second child, and so Colleen would be let out to look after this baby as well. At this point, Cameron began to build what he called the dungeon, a place where he was preparing to keep Colleen as well as many other women that he planned on kidnapping. And he actually forced Colleen to help him build this.
We dug this big hole underneath a shed in the backyard. It was like his fantasy. He always wanted to get other women.
Sometimes Colleen would even be let out of the box to carry out her chores unsupervised. So Cameron would be off building this dungeon, Jenice would be looking after the children, yet Colleen never once tried to escape. She just did her chores and then got back in the box. There was plenty of phones, there was neighbours all around this mobile home. There were so many chances for Colleen to try and run away and get away, but she was so scared of the company, so scared of them tracking down a family and killing them and her, that she just never tried.
I believed in the company. I believed he was in this company. I believed that they would do horrible things to me if I went against him or if I tried to run away.
In 1980, Colleen had been held captive and tortured for almost 4 years, and by then she'd kind of gained Cameron's trust enough for him to let her have a phone call home.
He said the company was watching them and that they were on their phone and they were listening, and if I dared to say anything, they'd be right in, they'd hurt people.
It was 1980, so the only phones around were house phones. So she called her house back in California, and the one to pick up the call was Colleen's youngest sister, Bonnie.
I said, "Hello, who is this?" She goes, "This is your sister, Colleen." And my heart, it just grew.
Obviously, at this point, Colleen had been missing without a trace for 4 years almost, and most of her family believed her to have been dead. I mean, her mother sent out those dental records, and so this was such a shock. Obviously, Bonnie asked her a ton of questions. She hadn't seen her sister in 4 years, so she was saying like, "Where have you been? What are you doing now? What's your life like now?" And because Colleen was so scared of the company, she thought they were watching her and Bonnie through this phone call. So she didn't say much of anything.
I just told her that I was all right and that I missed them all and I loved them all.
She was saying, "My time's going to be up soon. We better start saying our goodbyes,
Colleen's family never contacted authorities after this phone call because, Colleen told them that she was fine. She said it herself. And a lot of them actually believed that she'd joined a religious cult, and they were scared that if they contacted the police and told them about this, that she would kind of rebel, because obviously she wanted to be a part of this cult that they believed that she was part of, And so if they tried to get her back, they were scared that she might get mad at them and then want to cut off contact completely. They'd only just managed to speak to Colleen after 4 years, and so they didn't want to ruin it, so they just didn't contact police. A few months after this phone call, things were carrying on as they were, and then Cameron decided to let Colleen have a trip up to visit her family. So the two of them turned up at Colleen's family's house unannounced. They had no idea that they were turning up, and Cameron introduced himself as Colleen's new boyfriend under the alias of Michael or Mike Powers, the same one that he used to sign that contract. He left Colleen to be with her family for one day, like 24 hours, under the pretext that he had a convention somewhere, he was going to go there, and then he was going to pick her up the next day and take her back home.
He left, and the family just swarmed around her and hugged her and kissed her, and my first thoughts were, oh my God, she's so skinny, she's so thin and so pale. Almost like some of the life had been sucked out of her.
Colleen's family again avoided bombarding her with all these questions, asking her where she'd been. They just tried to enjoy this reunion. They didn't want to scare her off again because they believed that she was enjoying her life somewhere and she was only just getting back in contact with them. They didn't want to risk losing her again.
She wasn't giving us any information on where she had been and where she will be going. And the entire family, we were all afraid to sit her down and get it out of her. We were just afraid we would lose her again.
So the next afternoon, Cameron, or Mike Powers, came back from this fake convention that he was at, and he came to pick Colleen up. He said that they were just about to move houses actually, and so he would send over contact information as soon as they were settled in their new house.
They shared an emotional goodbye as a family member snapped one last picture, a smiling Colleen with her arms draped around her tormentor, Cameron Hooker.
Immediately on their return back to the mobile home, Colleen was locked straight away in the box without any kind of explanation. She hadn't done her chores, she hadn't done anything wrong, like he just wanted her locked away in this box as soon as they got back. It's believed that Cameron was scared that he maybe gave her a little bit too much freedom again, and he was scared that after this phone call, after the visit home, that she was just going to run away and run back to her family. And so for the foreseeable future, Colleen again was locked away in this box for 23 hours a day.
And I mean, I was locked up day and night. I was allowed to get out and use the bathroom and maybe eat something and drink some water and be locked up again.
Because she was locked away in this box for 23 hours a day, she was like horizontally laid down, so to be able to like go to the bathroom and stuff, she would use a bedpan that she would hook under herself using her feet. And I don't exactly, like I can't imagine how she would have done that, but that's all I could find, that's all I could find as a description as to how she went to the bathroom. It continued like this for a further 3 years until 1983, and remember she was abducted in 77, so it had been going like this for 6 years. In 1983, Jenise Hooker developed an interest in Christianity, and she always wanted to read the Bible, and Colleen was actually a devout Christian, and the Hooker family knew that.
Sometimes while Cameron was at work, Jan would come and let me out of the box and we would read the Bible together. So we kind of became friends on that level.
After his wife developed this interest in Christianity and religion, Cameron began letting her and Colleen go to church together every weekend, which Colleen was never allowed to do up until now. Being exposed to the Bible and the truth and going to church and everything just kind of opened up her heart and made her realize, I have to do something. So in 1983, Colleen was reintroduced to the couple's children and to neighbours because for the last 3 years she'd been locked in this box for 23 hours a day. Everyone thought she'd like moved away or something, but the whole time she was still there. She was just hidden. At this point, Cameron decided that he wanted to make Colleen his second wife. He was developing a strong attachment to her, and so he let her go out and get a job at a motel as a maid. So now Colleen had this job, she was going to church, she was in contact with a lot of different people that she could have told her situation, but still, she just wasn't trying to get away. On August 9th, 1984, it had been 7 years since Colleen Stan was abducted by the Hookers, and finally Jenise broke. She admitted to Colleen that Cameron had been lying this whole time about being a part of the company. He actually had nothing to do with the company, although she did maintain that the company was a real thing. And this whole time, the company had been the only thing keeping Colleen there. She had so many opportunities to try and get away, but she was just so scared of the company that she never did it. And so the next morning, Colleen tried it. She managed to get to the local bus station and she actually called Cameron Hooker from a payphone there.
And I said, I'm leaving and you can't stop me. And he got really upset and he was crying. And I just hung up the phone and I got on the bus and I left.
She returned home on the bus and she lived her life normally. She didn't tell anyone what had been happening for the last 7 years. She didn't contact authorities. She didn't tell police. She just came back and acted as if she'd just come back off a long vacation. She actually, over the coming months, stayed in contact with Cameron Hooker, calling him on the phone often because she felt that he had the ability to reform and become a better person. So 3 months since Colleen returned home and still she hadn't told police, she hadn't told her family, anything what had been going on over the last 7 years. Meanwhile, Jenise Hooker was still a regular attender at the local church even though her church partner had gone, and on November 8th, 1984, Jenise made what would be her last visit to the church. Jenise asked the pastor if she could make a confession.
She was very agitated and very upset and didn't know how to approach it. And it began to unfold things that I never dreamed could ever happen. And as she told the story, I said, wait a minute. I cannot listen to this alone. We need someone else here.
Jenise gave the pastor permission to call the police, and when they arrived, she also admitted it to them. 4 days after Jenise's confession, police managed to track down Colleen Stan, who was, like I said, living a normal life 570 miles away. Police said she didn't seem to be emotionally drained, she was functioning normally, she could talk to people normally. Really not what you would expect from someone that had been abducted, held captive and tortured for the last 7 years. Because of this, because of the way that Colleen was acting, police didn't actually believe Jenise Hooker's story at first.
It was so bizarre. They were not wanting to believe this woman's story. After they talked to me, I don't think they had a choice. They had to believe it.
So Cameron Hooker was arrested and put into police custody. Meanwhile, because Jenise was the one that helped Colleen to get away, whether that be directly or indirectly by just telling her that the company wasn't real, she was actually granted immunity. And if she agreed to testify against Cameron Hooker, she would not have to face any jail time. During the trial, it came out that there was literally nothing in Cameron Hooker's past that could have possibly indicated that he would turn out this way. Cameron had a great childhood, he had lots of friends, a loving family, no previous encounters with the police, and so it just struck everyone as very odd. Both homes that the Hooker family lived in during Colleen's imprisonment were searched, and so much evidence was found.
We found a lot of leather restraints, the 2 head boxes. We found what we called the stretcher, hooks in the ceiling, which corroborated both Jenise and Colleen's statement.
Cameron kept hundreds of pornographic magazines, most of which detailing some very violent bondage techniques, and he kept them all under the steps. Like I said, the one that he showed Colleen. He also had several photos of Colleen during the torture, and actually had an undeveloped roll of film with all these photos on that he was just waiting to print. Of course, as soon as this case was made public, it was all over the media. The media just couldn't get enough of it because it just doesn't seem real. It sounds like a story. Like, you could never imagine something like this happening in real life, and so everyone was covering it.
It just literally goes over your head and then closes up. They tell me it eliminates all sights, all sounds, all sense of direction.
So Cameron Hooker's trial began in that December, and he was facing over 18 different charges, obviously including kidnapping, rape, several other kind of sex crimes. Cameron Hooker pled not guilty to every single charge. claiming that Colleen was a willing participant and she was consensual through all of it. And there was evidence that Cameron could use to further his claims. I mean, there was that photo of the two of them at the parents' house where she had her arms around him. They looked like a couple. There was the fact that she pretty much just consensually went back with him after being with her parents. The fact that she didn't tell them what was going on. The fact that she never tried to get away once for 7 years. The fact that she never told anyone anything, even though she had gone home to her parents. She had a job at a motel. She went to church. The fact that she never once told anyone any of these things. She never once tried to run away. And the fact that when she returned home, she was safe. It was all over. The fact that she continued to stay in touch with Hooker. So the prosecutor fought these claims by saying it wasn't consensual, she was just brainwashed by Cameron. And she was just so scared of the company and she thought it was a real thing, and maybe she might have had a little bit of Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is defined as feelings of trust or affection felt in cases of kidnapping by a victim towards a captor. And this was evident in the way that Colleen, when she went home, she was safe, everything was over, she kept in contact with Cameron out of choice. And this would explain why she never went to police, not because it was consensual, but because she was brainwashed. In September of 1985, Cameron Hooker's second trial began, and the first witness called to the stand was his wife, Jenise Hooker.
Jenise was responsible for kidnapping Colleen and keeping her against her will for 7 years. And yet she was also responsible for freeing her.
Tons of evidence was presented in court just to show the jury the intensity and the extent of which Colleen was tortured.
We had all the props, we had all the things that they used. Both head boxes were there, all the cuffs, all the different tie things that he had.
The contract was a very important piece of evidence in this whole trial because it showed the point at which Colleen just gave up and started to believe in the company, and it showed the point at which Cameron's brainwashing really took over Colleen. Danny said in court that Cameron had actually found this contract in one of his bondage magazines. A replica model of the box under the bed was made so that the jury could see exactly what Colleen was going through for 23 hours a day most days. And the jury were even allowed to get into this box and lay in it and be able to put themselves in Colleen's shoes. A replica model of the dungeon that Colleen was forced to build under the shed was also made. Colleen Stan was then called to testify herself, and she gave a very detailed, thorough explanation of the whole rundown from start to finish of her whole 7-year ordeal.
I would go home and I was having trouble sleeping. I was dreaming the things that were happening to her.
And after Colleen's emotional testimony of what she went through, it was going to be really hard for Cameron and his attorney to be able to argue that it was consensual.
First 9 months that Colleen was in the home was a giant hurdle. I mean, because she was definitely kidnapped. She was definitely held against her will. She was not continuously held against her will, even though she was initially kidnapped and initially held against her will.
It was then a bunch of love letters from Colleen to Cameron were presented in the court, and if anything was going to prove her consent, it was going to be some love letters. Colleen confirmed under oath that that was her handwriting and she had written those letters, something that she'd never told anyone before, not police, not her attorneys, no one.
One of them read, "I seem to be falling deeper and deeper into love with you with each passing day."
It certainly indicated that there was some emotional feelings between Colleen and Cameron.
Colleen claimed that the only reason she ever sent these letters to Cameron was because the nicer she was to him, the nicer he would be back. And obviously also in their argument they used the fact that Colleen went home for a full day, she was without Cameron for 24 hours, just with her family, and she didn't once even hint towards anything that was going on, which does make it look consensual. So the prosecution brought in psychologists to help explain how Colleen could have been so brainwashed and manipulated by Cameron.
The sudden kidnapping, the death threats, being housed in a darkened area, the limiting communication, Hatcher was testifying to on the stand saying, this is real. This is how it happens. This is how these people lose control of their own lives.
3 weeks into Cameron Hooker's trial, Cameron Hooker himself was called to the stand. He maintained that yes, he did kidnap her, but after a few months, Colleen Stan fell in love with him, and from there, it was all just consensual for the next 7 years. Cameron's attorney also got in their own psychologist to help argue against the brainwashing claims.
Is there such a thing as an invisible bar that you can put around someone? His opinion was no.
After a 5-week trial, the jury began their deliberation, which took almost a week for them to come to a verdict.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Cameron Hooker, guilty of the offense of kidnapping, guilty of the offense of the rape on the stretcher.
The judge gave Cameron consecutive terms, totaling 104 years.
Colleen Stan immediately tried to go out and get a normal life. People had been telling her to, you know, keep it easy for a few months, you've gone through a lot, but she just wanted to get out there. She wanted to go get a job, she wanted to go get a car, because she hadn't had a life since she was 20. For almost a third of her life, she had been locked away in a box, and so she wanted to go out and live a life. Colleen studied an accounting degree, she got married, and even though they later got divorced, out of that marriage she had a daughter called Danielle. Colleen has since used her experience in a positive way. She's used it to campaign against abused women, abducted women, and she's also volunteered at helplines. Cameron Hooker was recently denied parole in 2015, and his next parole hearing will be in 2022. Although people believe that Cameron Hooker will never be out of prison. So that completes this video, that completes this case. A very, I believe this is probably the most not real sounding cases I've ever covered. Obviously it is real, I mean, I haven't just sat here and lied to you for like 30 minutes, but it just sounds like something someone made up. Like, it's so hard to believe that that could have happened to someone. Also, halfway through this video, I changed. I don't know if anyone noticed, but I filmed the first half of this video last night, and then the thunder started happening and I couldn't carry on filming, so I tried to do my makeup as similar as I can to last night, and I filmed the second half this morning. So hope you enjoyed this video anyway. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a big thumbs up on it. Comment down below what you thought of this case. I'm really interested to know just what you guys think of it, because it's such a crazy one. Like I said, subscribe if you want to see a little bit more from me, because I am uploading every single day until Tuesday, so make sure you click that subscribe button. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!